pie pastry here. So this is pretty easy. It only has about 4 ingredients. Here in my bowl I have flour, which I've sifted into here, as well as my iodized salt. And then I have here lard, but you can also use shortening or butter. And then I have ice water. It's very important that it is ice water. So first what I'm gonna do is cut in my fat into my flour, which should also be cold. We want to keep all this cold so that when it bakes, it like holds its shape and doesn't just sink down into the pan into like a flat deal in the bottom. All right, so once we have all of this in here, we'll start to cut it in. We'll just kind of push into it, and this will help mix it into the flour. We still want like pea-sized pieces of this though in the flour when we're done. That'll help give that pie a nice flaky texture as those cook, as opposed to if you want a mealy pie, then you'll keep going until it looks more like cornmeal, just like real small pieces. If you don't have a pastry cutter where you're at, you can always just use your fingers to break up the fat until they're all in those small pea-sized pieces. The pastry cutter doesn't, like, the whole idea is that we're trying to keep it all cold so that it bakes better, and the heat from your hands kind of goes against that. So using the pastry cutter works better. But I mean, your hands are better than nothing if that's not an option. All right, so we're getting there. Our pieces of fat are smaller, but they're not quite small enough. All right, so now that these are in the like smaller pieces here, I'm gonna go ahead and clean this off. All right, and then I'm gonna make a well in the center and start to add some of my water. So you wanna make sure you don't wanna get any of the ice in there, you only want the water, so we'll kind of block it off. And we'll just do about a tablespoon at a time to start. We're just trying to get it to where it forms a dough. We don't want it to be a super wet dough or it'll be really hard to roll out and form our pie crust. So now see it's starting to come together. So then that's probably plenty of water. So what we'll do with it now is we'll flatten it and wrap it in saran wrap and chill it so that that'll help it when we go to roll it out. It won't stick to the table. It'll help form our pie crust better as it's cold. So the whole idea of this is we're trying to keep everything cold to have a really nice product in the end. The more you flatten it out, the faster it'll chill if you're in a hurry as far as time. Wrap this up, and then we'll go ahead and come back to this once it is chilled. All right, so we're gonna finish our pie pastry here now that it's chilled and put it in the pan. So I just let it chill until it got nice and stiff to the touch, kind of like how cold butter feels, but maybe a little softer. So I'm gonna put some flour down here so it doesn't stick. You don't want a lot though. If you work too much flour into your pie crust, then it'll be tough. Just do a little more flour on top. So I'm gonna be real gentle when I roll this out. If you press hard when you're rolling this out, it'll like press it into the table and it'll stick. Gently back and forth. And I like to kind of turn it a little bit frequently so that I know that it's not sticking. a bench scraper to help kind of loosen it up. Throw a little more flour down if it's sticking. All right. All right, as you get to where you think it's getting close here, you can kind of lay your pie tin upside down to see if it's big enough. You want it to go a little bit beyond all the edges. So we're pretty close here. I'd say I like it to go about at least an inch beyond all the edges just to be safe. If you get like clumps of dough on your rolling pin, you want to take those off right away or it'll stick to the rest of the dough and tear it. All right, so now that I know that it'll fit, I'm gonna go ahead and fold it into fourths using my bench scraper to get it in the pie pan. Loosen it up a little bit first. And folding into fourths just makes it easier to try to pick up the whole thing. They're kind of a little bit delicate, so it'll likely tear. So I'm gonna lay it so that the corner is in the center of the pie pan, and then I'm gonna unfold it. It's okay if it's not perfect. We can kind of go back and fix that a little bit. But I covered all my edges, so that's good. So what I'm gonna do next is make sure, kind of go around with my finger and make sure, I'll kind of lift up the edge and make sure that it's actually touching the corners of the pan. Do that so that when we bake it, there's no air gap. If there's a gap in these corners, then it'll sink down into it and we won't have a nice tall pie crust. Once I've done that, you can take a paring knife or a bench scraper and just go around the edges. Get rid of our excess dough, and then to make the edges look nice, I'm gonna get some flour on my finger so that it doesn't stick, and I'm just gonna pinch the dough between my pointer finger and thumb and my other pointer finger. I'm just gonna go all the way around. Just get a little more flour if the dough starts to stick to your fingers. You can do all sorts of different edges, but this is just an easy kind of basic one to do starting off. All right, almost done here. Okay, so once we have all of our edges looking nice, the last thing we need to do is dock it. So I'll grab a fork here, and we're just gonna poke holes all the way around the bottom and the sides. What this will do is when it bakes, it'll keep the dough from bubbling up, so you'll still have a nice flat bottom to your pie. All right, once I've done that, I'll chill it again, and then it can get baked off, and then we can fill it with whatever type of filling we want to.